right, to what? Radicalize the term foundational Black American, right? We start to see these DNC puppets, right? Coming out of the woodworks, man, coming out of the woodworks with disparaging words about a lineage, not a group, but a lineage. We started to see a lot of this just start popping up out of nowhere, right before Black History Month, which is which is kind of weird. You feel me? Which is kind of weird, but we saw right before Black History Month. And sure enough, just like clockwork, we already knew what was going to happen, right? We started to see these people, these influencers who we've already talked about right here on Elite Media, who are sent to what? Disrupt, collectively talk down on, and then as well try to weaponize the term foundational Black Americans. When it's just a lineage, right? When it's just a lineage, when we've made it very, very clear to these people, and these people know this, but the language is very specific to what? To incite a certain ideology and to incite a certain energy towards foundational Black Americans and how we're moving right now with our delineation movement. It has literally turned over the apple cart. So what I wanted to do today was to take some time to explain to these people how foundational Black Americans built this country, how they built the United States of America, right? Because it seems like a lot of people have forgotten. So I think it's important that we go through the numbers. I think it's important that we go through every single detail to have somewhere now that we can reference. And like I said, my channel and what we're trying to do here, I may not fit into a lot of the different modes, right? But my goal is to have reference points, history, and being able to bring that history so that at any point, if anybody needs to reference these talking points, they can come right here, they'll find this information, and it'll be right here for them. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of where my goal, I feel like that's my role in this whole foundational Black American media space. You feel me? Is me making sure that we're using the history, right? And the information that's out there for us to study to be able to say, you know what? This is the history. This is exactly what was going on. This is what we can reference for if we ever need to debate or speak on a certain topic, right? I want to make sure that everybody who patronizes my channel has a very specific talking point and knows exactly what they mean when they say it. You feel me? Because that's what we got to do here. We got to make sure that we mean what we say. You know what I'm saying? So first of all, I wrote a little essay, first of all, you feel me? Just to make sure that we were on the same page with kind of where I'm going. So I'm going to make sure that I read this. So I'm trying to work on, you know, my UR rating and all that good stuff. But we're going to make sure that we always have information referenced, and as well, we're putting it together and presenting it to you guys in the best way possible, right? So let's start here. Slavery played a pivotal role in shaping America's economy, culture, and society. The transatlantic slave trade brought millions of Africans from Africa to the United States, forcing them to work on plantations, particularly in the South, producing lucrative crops like cotton, tobacco, and sugar. This enslaved labor generated an immense wealth, driving laborers generated immense wealth, right? Driving the culture's economy, economic growth, and establishing the United States as a major global power, right? So like I always say here is, when I reference the fact that the United States became a superpower, right? That was literally on the backs of what foundational Black Americans did right here as slaves in this country, right? And so a lot of times when we hear people say that other specific groups built this country, it definitely does feel very disrespectful to our ancestors who were literally enslaved, doing the work that no one else wanted to do and could do under the most heinous and ridiculous circumstances that any people have ever experienced across the history of this world that we live in today. So naturally, when we hear people say or try to speak towards the fact that someone else did the integral building of this country, it definitely has to be brought all the way back to the actual history of what actually happened. Okay. Sure, yes, it's very, very, cute to spit a narrative that somehow aligns, right, with what's happening right now, right? What everybody's doing, what's going on in the space, right? But in reality, we always have to make sure that we stand on business. We always have to make sure that we bring the receipts because it's important, because there are a lot of people out here right now who are moving not on the facts, they're moving on feelings. And it's very important that as foundational Black Americans, we use our platforms to make sure that we are giving people the specific information that's necessary to continue to debunk these narratives that we see every single day on these YouTube streets, in the media, on mainstream, front street, on television, guys. All right. Because it is important for us to make sure that we continue to keep the narrative correct and make sure that we're referencing it correct. Right. So let's continue. The economic impact of slavery was profound. Enslaved Black Americans were a significant portion of the workforce, especially in the Southern colonies, where they made up and about 1/3 of the population by 1861. Okay, so by 1861, right here, we were already 1/3 of the population. Foundational Black Americans had already became 1/3 of the population, and they were already a huge portion, if not the biggest portion of the workforce at this time. The labor intensive nature of crops like cotton and tobacco relied heavily on enslaved workers, generating substantial profits for plantation owners and merchants. These profits, in turn, fueled industrialization, urbanization, and growth of cities like Charleston, Boston, and New York, right? So, like we always talk about, is the fact that these cities, these states, this country was built on the backs of foundational Black Americans and what we built right here in this country, right? It's very important that we stay on code with that because, like I said, there's been a changing of the narrative, we'll say, right? There's been a narrative change that they're trying to push right now to make it seem like, hey, guys, you know what? Immigrants built this country. I beg to differ, sir, because if I look at the history, if I look at the factuals, right, and what exactly happened here, it is the complete opposite. We understand this, right? But it is important for us, like I said, to make sure that we get up here and we bring receipts. We don't just hop on here without telling you guys the exact facts and why a lot of foundational Black Americans feel some type of way when we hear you guys speaking these narratives saying that, what? Immigrants built this country, did they? Okay. We're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to talk about that. We're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to look at the facts. Okay. So let's continue. However, this prosperity came at a tremendous human cost. Slavery was a brutal system that dehumanized enslaved people, denying them basic rights and subjecting them to violence and exploitation. The legacy of slavery continues to influence American society, contributing to ongoing racial disparities in education, income, and wealth. Studies show that Black American families whose ancestors were enslaved until the Civil War have a lower economic status, education, and wealth composed to those of their ancestors who were the gained freemen earlier in this time. So listen, guys, that's the key here is a lot of us, when we speak about reparations and we speak about what our ancestors were entitled to and the fact that that was actually lost as our generations got more into the modern times, that's why we speak about this, is because there was a wealth transfer that happened through systemic racist systems that were created right here in the United States of America against foundational Black Americans and our growth and prosperity. Alternatively, right? Alternatively, we've seen more and more out of history how when we were separate, we were creating our own situations. We had our own Wall Street. We had our own Rosewood. We had cities that were thriving. They were always targeted, right, by white nationalists and the KKK, police and the government. All right, all these systems to oppress us. And so that's why a lot of us, we feel some type of way when we hear people who have not had this specific same lineage speak the way that they speak when it comes to foundational Black Americans and what we have built and our ancestors have built right here in this country. And that's why it's important for us to make sure that we stay on code, man, because there's no way that we're going to allow anybody to come up in here and disrespect what we got going on, right? The impact of slavery extends beyond economics to shape American culture and institutions. It influenced social norms, laws, and political structures, entrenching racial hierarchies that persist today. Efforts to acknowledge and confront this legacy continue, with debates over teaching Black American history, the removal of Confederate monuments, and reparations for the descendants of the enslaved people. Okay? I wanted to make sure when I wrote that essay that I included that, because it's an important piece of our lineage. It's an important piece of our history that we are paid back for what is owed, okay? For what we have sacrificed over so many generations, how much that we have cultivated lands that have made and generated billions of dollars for many of families who are powerful right now and are still within that wealth that was generated during that time, right? We're looking at people who are still living off money from slavery, okay? And that's the coldest part, is the fact that we can still trace the money back, yet they're telling us that reparations is impossible. I don't know, man. I don't know. Something doesn't add up to that. Something's not clicking for me when I made that clear, right? So let me read that last part once again. Efforts to acknowledge and confront this legacy continue, with debates over teaching Black American history, removing Confederate monuments, and reparations for the descendants of the enslaved people. Slavery was a foundational part to America's development, shaping its economy, culture, and society. Understanding this history is crucial for addressing ongoing racial inequalities and building a more equitable future. I mean, come on, man. This is just what we're talking about, y'all. So look, now that I got that first part out, let's start looking at some history. Let's do a history lesson, right? Let's go through a quick history lesson on slavery in the United States. For all of y'all who just don't get it, who don't understand the beautiful essay that I just wrote, who don't understand that beautiful essay that I just wrote, okay? We're gonna go through the exact history and the exact economies that were built off of foundational Black Americans' backs. All right, let's go through it, man. Let's go. All right, because you guys are just acting slow, and we don't got time for that.
In 1619, in a port near Jamestown, 20 African slaves first set foot on Virginia from the pirate ship White Lion. So the history of slavery in the territory of the future U.S. began.
All right, so 1619 is what this video references. All right, 1619, they're saying the first slaves touched the grounds here in America. Now, there's the history that they will not teach you, where I can close the gap. When they got here in 1619, Like we all know, there were many wars going on around this entire country. Why? Because there were many countries that were owning parts of what you guys consider now the modern United States, right? In between who? Glad you asked. In between Spain, France, and who else? England, right? So you had all these people that were already here, right? Trying to colonize what we consider now the modern United States of America. Okay, so who else were already here? Well, glad you asked. Indigenous people of melanated backgrounds. Okay, there were many of melanated people that were already here when these first settlers came in 1619. And that's why when you look at this history and we make it clear as American freedmen, that a lot of us were already here in 1619. We were already here, man. A lot of us were already here. A lot of us had already been right here on what you guys consider now the United States of America. But during this time, when these people got here in 1619 with the first slaves, a lot of us were also being put into captive and then also being colonized right at the same time.
It lasted more than 200 years and was full of bitter injustice, racism, brutal killings, horrific tortures, merciless exploitation, bloody sweat, and untold suffering of disenfranchised slaves. The main economic activity of the British in North America was agriculture, which in the late 17th century occupied more than 82% of the colonists.
All right. So you guys catch that? 82%. Okay. This was 82% of the economy at this time already. How do you build an economy with 82% of it being what? The crops that specifically foundational Black Americans were put into slavery to make sure that they were the ones cultivating this to what? Push the country forward. The history is what? Black Americans are the builders. All this was us.
At that time, the most profitable was the cultivation of tobacco. The profitability of this business was about 400%. However, the difficult working conditions on the tobacco plantations discouraged white employees. The Indians, too, didn't want to be involved in the cultivation of this product.
All right. So already, you guys see right here, right? When they talk about that white Americans weren't the ones who built this country. I talk about this all the time because they couldn't do it. They did not have the manpower. They did not have the ingenuity. They did not have the infrastructure to be able to do this without the foundational Black American slaves who are the ones who actually had the smarts, who understood the crops, who understood the land. How would they understand the land, Brandon? Well, guess what? It's because they were already there. They were already there cultivating these lands. They already knew what tobacco was. They already had irrigation systems, how to work. They were already the ones who were the agricultural backbone, the agricultural backbone of this country. We were already doing that when they got here in 1619. That's why this place was so fascinating to them, because we had already started to cultivate it. It had already been a beautiful, vast, okay? We were already doing that here. So that's why when we say this, hey, who was the ones? It was us. We were the ones building this shit.
For this reason, the owners of the estates decided to eliminate the shortage of workers with the help of imported slaves from tropical Africa. In the early 16th century, European colonialist elites, obsessed with religious superiority and cave xenophobia, perceived other civilizations at best as second-class people who needed the tutelage of white Christians. At worst, they were perceived as members of a different species. These inhuman delusions and an incredible thirst for riches justified the enslavement of people of other races and religions. Spanish, Portuguese, English, and Dutch slavers most often took slaves from the west coast of Africa. Africans were mostly captured by enemy local chiefs during war.
Okay, so now, as you guys can understand, this was a very, very small portion of the people that survived and were brought here. Like I said, during that 1619, we had already understood that there was a bunch, many of melanated people indigenous to these lands who were here already. And so now that we saw the influx of not only those who were brought here and then those who were already here, they create what? A new specific lineage that has now become the workers, the people who are part of the slave system here in America. So let's skip forward so that we can get to a little bit of the numbers aspect here. So let me go here. All right, because we got to make sure we keep it all the way on the numbers.
Increase human trafficking. Therefore, in 1751 to 1775, more than 84,000 imprisoned Africans were officially brought to the territory of 13 colonies. In 1801 to 1807, more than 109,000 slaves were brought into the United States. In total, more than 597,000 slaves were brought from Africa.
All right. So we already understand that there is a specific position, that there is a group of people who were brought here to be what? That working class, right? To be the ones who are going to be the foundation of what they wanted to do, as far as like what they wanted to build this now what we call the American United States of America, right? So let's go here. Let's see. Let's go back to now this part, right? We're going to skip ahead because I don't want to keep y'all too long. All right, so let's go.
In 1639, Virginia passed a law that provided imprisonment and other forms of punishment for those white people who slept together, congregated, married, or was seen having sexual intercourse with the representatives of the other races. Maryland passed similar regulations in 1661, and Carolina in 1671. However, these laws did not apply to wealthy slaveholders and their clients, who raped or encouraged sexual interaction with defenseless black slaves.
All right. So now this is the specific time, right? For me, at least in my family, when I look at my family tree, I can see up to 1600s when the people who were the owners of my family came here, and they came from Ireland, right? So I can see where when they get here, and then boom, right after that, now I see my most furthest back great grandmother, right? Who was what? A Native American and a child of a slave master, right? So the mixture of that, right, becomes what? A mulatto slave is what they were considered back in those days in the 1600s, which was considered a mulatto slave. But in reality, what she was a Native American who was captured, put into slavery, and then forced to have a child from this slave master who now is our family. And with the admixture, we now have our family. This is how a lot of Black American families were built. This is where a lot of our foundation came from, was that admixture of both the slave master, the indigenous people who were here, and then as well, the working slave class of those descendants who also were brought here. That is now what becomes the foundational Black American lineage, right? And so they speak about this, right? So let me bring this back up for y'all so we can make sure we stand on business.
African slaves were left with no power. Under the laws of most English colonies in the early 18th century, slavers were allowed to carry out any physical violence and use bloody torture on their slaves, or even execute them at their own discretion. The movement of slaves was so limited that in Virginia, any black slave could be quartered if he appeared on the street after 9 p.m. Sometimes, relatives or children were punished for their parents' guilt by having their fingers cut off or their ears cut off. Slaves in the English colonies were akin to pets or tools by which their owners earned their capital.
Now understand, right, that when people talk about what Black Americans were up against and what we went through and our plight and how things were specifically, right? How things were specifically different for us and everyone else. This is what we're talking about. And that's why, from our perspective, when we speak on a lot of things, it's crazy for us to see how people can try to discredit that. We were not a people who were just fled. We just left where we came from. We were brought here without any type of help, given the worst conditions possible. And we still were able to overcome those and be able to create some of the greatest things to ever exist in the history of the world and existence. So when people try to discredit foundational Black Americans, what have been built right here in America, this entire country, we always have to make sure that we show you guys the history. We always have to make sure that we let you guys understand that when you guys try to discredit and try to take credit for something that you did not do, we will bring the history up and make sure that you guys never forget the sacrifices that we made as a people right here in this country.
In the southern colonies, slaves mostly worked hard under unbearable conditions in the hot sun on cotton or tobacco plantations. The working day could be from 14 to 18 hours, and every attempt at unauthorized rest was punished with a whip. In the northern provinces, slave labor was employed on farms, in forestry, metallurgy, and textiles. Some of the slaves remained in the role of household servants, who had to fulfill all the wishes of the owners.
All right, so listen, did you guys hear those industries? These specific industries, especially at this time, were how the foundational Black American pushed the United States into the industrial era, right? Because we were the ones who were generating all of the work. We were the ones generating everything, the resources, the textiles. That was us. We were the ones still cultivating the lands because we were the ones who knew the lands. The agriculture, the understanding, that was us. We were the ones on the farms. We were the farmers. We were the cultivators. We were the sharecroppers. So for us, when we looked at the industry and now the industry is starting to become what? The Industrial Revolution, it would not be an Industrial Revolution without foundational Black Americans and those specific slaves who built these industries into what they became today. That is what I speak on when I talk about people are trying to just glaze over. They're trying to just glaze over the real facts. And these are the real facts. The real facts are, if you look at any economy that was literally created in the United States of America, there were foundational Black Americans who were the ones who gave that foundation for those billion-dollar companies to become what they are today. Many of them still living off of money that they generated during slavery. We can look all the way back to J.P. Morgan. All right. These are all facts that you guys can look up yourself. I'm just here to make sure that I'm using my platform to continue to make sure that we look at things from this perspective. Facts over feelings. Facts over feelings. I don't have time to get on here and try to just let people disrespect our lineage without showing you guys why we say foundational Black Americans built this country. I cannot get on here and say that without showing you what? The facts.
In such infernal working conditions, the average working life of a slave was between 7 and 10 years. Because of such unbearable living and working conditions, the slaves tried to escape. They also protested with passive resistance and slow labor. There were times when it came to armed resistance. In 1712, New York's black slaves rebelled against crushed.
All right. So like I always say, foundational Black Americans stood on business since day one. We was never just cool with what was happening to us. We never was just okay with how things were. We always fought against we always tried our best to make sure that we were trying to push ourselves into a better position than we were in the past. Foundational Black Americans were always in the pocket, not afraid to go where it needed to go, to die for what they believed in, which was what? Equality across the board. And so when people try to disrespect our lineage, right? When I hear people talk crazy and try to say that these people who have not been through this same experience and history were the ones responsible for building this country, I must bring you the history and the receipts to make sure that I continue to let you know that you're wrong. All right. It's okay to be wrong sometimes. Okay. Have people made great contributions to this country? Yes. Have people helped this country? Yes. Have people done great things for this country? Yes. But to say that these specific people built this country is disingenuous, and it's a lie. And I can show you this through the history and the facts, and why, on the back end of all this, why foundational Black Americans have chose to delineate, because you guys continue to do this. Every time you guys win something, anytime something good is happening for you, you guys go out of your way to take credit for things that you did not build. And foundational Black Americans have gotten tired of it. And we have said, you know what? It's time for us to make sure that we are taking credit for what's ours. And we're going to remind you guys why we say what we said. We will not allow you guys to continue to disrespect the lineage. It's just not going to happen. Not in 2026, okay? Not on Soulja Boy's internet. You feel me? This will not happen on Soulja Boy's internet. We will not allow y'all to disrespect our ancestors when what they have built, what they fought for, the resistance and the brutality that they had to endure over the many generations, and things that we still fighting for today. The audacity of these people to disrespect so openly and so blatantly is why I use my channel to go out of my way to bring the receipts.
22 participants were executed after demonstrative torture. One of them was burned alive to intimidate other slaves.
Obvious.
In 1739, about 200 slaves revolted on the Stono plantation near Charleston. They killed several planters, ransacked the houses of slaveholders, and tried to reach the Spanish possessions in Florida, but were defeated by the local militia.
All right. Continued resistance, continued fighting, never stopping. For what? Freedom. Y'all want to equate this to you going somewhere else? No, we can't do that. That is disingenuous, and it's a lie. Like I continue to say, that is a lie. You guys cannot do that. To equate our plight as foundational Black Americans to anybody else, it is disingenuous and it is a lie, because we had to fight for everything that we have here. And not only that, we were killed. All right. You guys are fighting to work. We were fighting to be free. There's a difference. Okay. You were fighting to work. We were fighting to be free. It's not the same. It's not the same. Our ancestors had a way different. We're in the 1700s right here, y'all. We're not even deep in. This is the 1700s. Okay. Y'all talking about stuff that ain't even happened since the 1990s. We in the 1700s right here.
In New York City in 1741, more than 100 Africans were accused of burning and arson, despite insufficient evidence. 34 of them were tortured and executed, and 84 of them were tortured and then sold into slavery in the West Indies. The most violent slave rebellion in American history occurred in 1831 in Virginia, led by Nat Turner. The rebels killed more than 60 white people, including several women and children of slaveholders.
All right. Nat Turner in 1861 led the most violent slave revolt in history. Y'all want to get on here. Y'all want to get on the internet and try to say that Black Americans were not responsible for building this country, that you guys wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for these people. The audacity is overwhelming. It makes me feel some type of way because I can see it from a mile away. I see the game that y'all are willing to play. And it is my responsibility as a person, a historian, somebody who takes time to do this research. I cannot allow y'all to get on here and allow you guys to say what you guys have been saying, disrespecting our lineage, disrespecting our people. I can't allow it, man, because what that does is make me troll. It makes me go a little bit harder. It makes me do my research, right? It makes me go ahead and hop on here and bring up the receipts. Because we ain't got time to be listening to y'all just talking. We're going to bring the receipts. And if you got tired of that, if you ain't got time for that, that's on you. But the receipts will never be disrespected. Foundational Black Americans built this country. Fuck y'all talking.
Were defeated by the predominant local militia and guardians. The rebels lost more than 160 men during the resistance. The Declaration of U.S. Independence, contrary to the proclaimed democratic principles of the new state, did not lead to the emancipation of Black slaves because many influential slaveholders remained in the government.
All right. This is what we talk about, man. Y'all love to talk about what you think you know, but the history will always speak for itself, man. There was no emancipation for foundational Black Americans during this time when we were actually building the country into what it became, a superpower. We were still the ones being oppressed. We were still the ones forced onto plantations. We were still the ones forced into work. We were still the ones forced into human trafficking. All right. I can't say the R word on YouTube, but you know what that is. Bondage. All right. We were still the ones during this time. Okay. During the Declaration of Independence, that was not a specific time that was supposed to be for anybody but the white man in white America. But foundational Black Americans, we built it for him. We had this whole place set up when everybody else could come and benefit from it. It was already set up.
The first president of the United States, George Washington, owned 84 African-American slaves. The fourth president, James Madison, in a letter to a colleague, admitted that each slave made him a $240 profit per year. In 1793, Virginia resident Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin machine, which...
All right. So did you hear that? Let's go back to that part because I want y'all to hear this part. The $240, right? Let's go again on that. Hold on, let me make sure it's on the screen. All right, let's go.
Colleague admitted that each slave made him a $240 profit per year.
All right. So let's see when James Madison was president, right? Let's make sure we got the year correct here. James, because you know I'm gonna go in. We're gonna go all the way in. James Madison, president. All right, US president. All right. So boom. Let's see here. All right. He was from 1809 to 1817. All right. So he said $240, right? So what would be $240 in 1809? Let's see. Work today, right? So let's see here. Let's see what the young Googler does. All right. So today, that's around $6,000. All right. $6,324. All right. That's how much a slave was worth. Okay, listen to this again so you guys can understand. Because you guys, sometimes I gotta break it down in a specific way so that y'all can really, really get it. But listen to this.
4 African American slaves. The fourth president, James Madison, in a letter to a colleague, admitted that each slave made him a $240 profit per year.
Per year. Okay. So if he had over 84, right? 84 slaves, right? Let's go. 84 slaves at 63.24. That's over $531,000 a year. All right. In 1809. All right. So listen, the equation of this type of money and this type of wealth that was given to these specific families during this time, based on what? The backs of foundational Black Americans, y'all. I just did the equation right there for y'all. Just simple math, because that's how my mind works. You feel me? That's how we do it. You know what I'm saying? I know how to count up and try to round up and figure out the numbers in my mind. But to figure out those numbers, when James Madison himself said that they would make him around $240 a year in 1809, the equation would come back to around $6,324 in today's dollar bill, right? Times that by 84, that's $531,000 a year that these people were making off the backs of slaves in this country. All right. When they talk about a wealth disparity, there it is right there. I just broke it down for y'all. I got to clip that when we get back. You feel me? Just to make sure that y'all understand the number aspect. But yo, that's literally crazy to think about, man. Crazy.
In 1793, Virginia resident Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin machine, which allowed people to process cotton several times faster. This invention increased the profitability of the business of the planters of the southern states.
Now, it is a lot of speculation about who invented the cotton gin. All right. There's a lot of speculation about who invented the cotton gin. All right. Because y'all know, okay, y'all know a lot of our people, okay, was the ones who invented it, and then them people stole the patents. Okay, so let's keep it a buck here. Let's keep it a buck. All right, a lot of them inventions, a lot of that stuff that was going on, it was us. We was the ones. Okay, we was the ones who invented it, and then they took it. You feel me? That's just what it was. Like, we already know how that goes. So let's continue, because I want to make sure we get through this.
Which increased the flow of investment in their cotton slave business and became even more active in protecting the institution of slavery. In the northern states, the Industrial Revolution continued, requiring more skilled and motivated workers than powerless, illiterate slaves, who were prone to sabotage and slower to master the new mechanisms. Therefore, these states gradually abolished slavery in their territory. Vermont became the first land liberated from slavery in 1770. In 1780, slavery was abolished in Pennsylvania, and in 1783, Massachusetts and New Hampshire followed suit. Slavery was abolished in Connecticut and Rhode Island in 1784 and disappeared from New York in 1799.
Yeah. I think it's important, like, to make sure that we always reference history. I think it's very important, man, because as you guys can tell, like, as I've been going through this, because this is just what I do, it's important from my perspective to always make sure that I bring a certain level of factual backing, because we see so much, misinformation these days, and it really pisses me off, because this is something that's a byproduct of our generation. You know what I'm saying? Of people doing a lot of troll behavior, and we're just gonna create cliques and try to rile people up. But when I look at it, when I put these things together, right, when I take the time And like I just did for y'all right now, it always comes back to me and it always makes me feel some type of way where I'm like, nah, man, this is crazy. Like, it's crazy how people could just disrespect and try to, you know, make it seem like something that it's not. And from my perspective, I will never allow anybody to ever disrespect the lineage of foundational Black Americans without us bringing factual history to back up the fact of what we got to say. You know what I mean? I don't care what nobody got to say about, you know, what you think. You feel me? What you think might have happened. All right. Because at the end of the day, what did happen is what I'm speaking on right now, is the fact that there were many of us who had gone through many of things, man. Very, very sad, very, very unfortunate. Okay. And yet y'all want to, you know, try to debate. How can you guys debate a lineage in history? Is just beyond me. Like, I just don't understand it. There's no debate. All right. What we can talk about, sure. Okay, so what? Black Americans, we're gonna be doing our own thing. Okay, cool. I don't think that needs to be debated. I think all that needs to be talked about is, hey guys, we're here, we're representing our specific lineage. These are the things that we want to, you know what I'm saying, see changed in our communities. This is what we want to see change in our world. This is what we want to see changed in our lives, right? Because not too long ago, there was a time where we were still the people who were considered less than human, who were considered subhuman, who were considered not a part of this country, who had went through some very, very heinous times. And that's why I want to bring up this last video, just so you guys can understand what it looked like. All right, let's go. This is former slaves. Okay, it's not that long ago, y'all. Listen to this.
He work hard. Work hard. He work hard.
I work hard. I get up at 4 o'clock and get my breakfast done. Just at dawn of day, I go to the field and we pick cotton.
Mr. and Mrs. Haywood Jenkins of Sharkey County, Mississippi have, between them, picked cotton for over a century.
Over a century, guys. Look at her face. Look at her face. Our ancestors, right here, over a century. They have been on a plantation over a century, y'all. And y'all want to try to equate that to what? It's not the same. It will never be the same. And we're not disrespecting your plight as immigrants. We're not disrespecting what you did to get here. All I'm saying is don't disrespect our lineage. Don't disrespect our ancestors, because it is very important to us. This is a rich history that you guys need to take time to study before you go around saying inflammatory things, talking about that you guys built something that you did not build. These people right here were the ones who built this country right here. These people were the ones who built America right here.
My boss man came along. He says, Ray Jane? I said, sir. Says, I say, when you wash? I said, I washed last night. He said, I don't want you to do that no more. That's my agent, you know. He says, every Friday morning or Friday evening, you wash. And let all the children stay there with you until you get through. When you get through, then y'all can go back to field and wait. Now, the agents was mean, some of them. Some of them was mean. They want to hook the colored people. And that kind of white man come along.
Look at his face, man. Look at his face. That brother done been through it, man. That brother done seen it all. Done seen the worst. And y'all want to try to equate, you feel me, a certain plight to ours. Nah, man, we ain't gonna allow that, y'all. We ain't gonna allow that, man. This is just not, it's not the same, y'all. It's not. Foundational Black Americans built this country through very, very, very intense situations, man.
Hey, but you ain't in the field yet? He just had started the plan. He said, yes, I just not had to eat my dinner. God damn it, you ain't doing a goddamn thing. Says, God damn it, ought to take this damn stick and frail the hell out you. He said, no, he said, if you frail the hell out of me, goddamn, I frail the hell out of you. Make me feel bad if I was under them, you know, how mean they was to treat us like that.
That's it, man. That's all I got, man. That's all I gotta say. Okay. Foundational Black Americans, we don't got nothing to prove to nobody, y'all. Stop letting these situations trigger us. All we gotta do is continue to respond, right? Say our piece and let people understand this is what's going on. This is what we will respect. We will not allow you guys to speak on something that you have no actual principle towards, right? And we will sit back and let the history speak for itself. That's what I'm here for, man. Every time I get on this channel, every time I try my best to bring or present something, it's always with factual history and something to back up my stance. I never get on here spitting inflammatory things that are just my opinions or me just trying to, you know, say something to go viral. Every time I get on here, I'm always speaking about the facts and the history. And I want you guys to make sure that anybody who patronizes my channel, who patronizes my, you know, profile, whatever, however you come across the content, all I want you guys to do is understand that when we speak, it's all about respect. All right. And it's all about respect for the ancestors, because without them, none of y'all would be here. None of y'all. Okay. Without them, none of us would be here. Okay. So make sure that you watch how you talk to people and you watch how you treat a certain specific lineage. Because, like I said, Foundational Black Americans, we run the internet. So be careful how you talk to people and be careful how you treat people and be careful what you say. You know what I'm saying? And make sure if you do got something to say, make sure it makes sense. Don't just be up here saying stuff just to say it, to try to make it seem like, you know, you're trying to pander. No. If you want to speak to your people, speak to your people. But don't be going around here talking inflammatory, saying that specific people built this country when they didn't. I just showed you guys the history. I just showed you guys the economic windfall of the Foundational Black Americans and our straight up base, all right? A base that we built for everybody else to be able to traject themselves off of, all right? So make sure y'all stay tapped in, man. We gonna keep going, man. It's Black History Month. So y'all know I'm gonna be on here as much as I can, speaking on Black issues, speaking on Black history, because that's just what I love, man. I love this shit. I personally love this shit, man. So it's very easy for me to get on here and speak about the history and to speak about, you know, the things that's all going through our community right now. And I'm gonna try my best to go live and or drop videos as much as I can this month. All right. I got a big, what would I say? A big goal for myself. You know what I'm saying? And I want to make sure I hit that goal. So I'm going to be, you know, ramping it up. You know what I'm saying? This month, like I said, January was a great month. Now we got to make sure that February is just as good. So salute to everybody out there. Happy Black History Month, everyone. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, man, because that's what we need. We need you guys' support to be able to grow the channel into what I know it can be. Elite Media, Brandon B, man. We taking this shit to the top. All right. So make sure you guys stay tapped in, man. My name's Brandon B. This is Elite Media, man, and I'm out. Peace.